Devin Heroux joining us. Like I said, covers all the curling events in the country. Does an excellent job. Great follow on Twitter. And there's 3 Bedford Road Collegiate graduates now on this phone call. One barely. That'd be me. Devin, you were like the guy. SRC, is that what it's called? Class president, all that kind of stuff. Thanks for taking some time today. I know you took the red eye back home last night.
Yeah, red eye. The morning after, the day after the Brier burning is always a tough slog. But there were some long faces curlers who had been eliminated from the Brier at the airport on that flight as well, including Mark Nichols from Team Gushue. So that's always interesting to navigate, right? Because you've got the party in the hotel lobby when I left, Team Jacobs going crazy. And then you show up at the airport and you got the long faces in the lounge there and all the fans wanting to talk to them. What happened? Like you can imagine that scene. So back in Toronto after a brilliant Brier in Kelowna.
Yeah. Was Benny Hebert tarpless like his son in the hotel bar?
I got a text message from Ben Hebert at would have been about 4 a.m. Pacific time. I imagine he was tarpless with the tankard. Yes.
Nice.
And listen, guys, I can report that the tankard is actually in the back of the pickup truck of Mark Kennedy. It's on its way from Kelowna to Calgary right now. I just got an update. So it is in one piece. Benny didn't rip it apart because I thought he might in the hotel lobby last night.
Hey, Devin, it's Maz here. You mentioned Brad Gushue, and last year he was so good. They made every shot, whether it was the simple to the incredible. This year, it just seemed like as the week went on, the magic necessarily wasn't there. Did you see that as well?
Yeah, bang on. The magic ran out. My good pal, the great Colleen Jones, said to win one of these things, and she would know she won 6 of them, she said you got to get breaks and you got to have some magic. And there has been this aura of invincibility around Gushue, and I'll be honest, I'll admit it on this show, I probably had a tweet prepared, Gushue for the win, when he settled in the hack in that semifinal, because I fully expected him, I think like everybody else on the planet, to make that shot. That's a pretty routine shot he had for the win in the semifinal, and he overthrew it, and it was shocking. There's no other way to say it. It was shocking. I talked to Mark Nichols about it. I wondered if maybe the clock, he only had 7 seconds left, and Gushue's never in time clock management issues. Kevin Cooey is, Brad Jacobs seems to be, and they seem to be really calm. I just wondered if maybe his adrenaline was pumping a little bit more, but he overthrew it. And that just doesn't happen. So that magic ran out. We've got a new champion, but I mean the guy's been dominant. 6 wins in 8 years, and I think if he would have made it past Jacobs, he probably has a 7th. So Jacobs got lucky a few times. I thought he snatched victory from the jaws of defeat a number of times, but you got to do that on the way to a championship.
You watch a lot more curling than any of us, Devin, and I was talking to Maz as we started the show, and this wasn't to be funny or anything like that, but I look at golf back in the 80s, in the 70s, and you look at curling. I remember I used to watch with my dad, 632 Avenue I South, watching the Brier, watching the Sky, and there, especially the Brier, there were more missed shots. It was almost like, the guys had the shakes. And I read a golf article once that it's because guys would, they were drinking till all hours of the day and golfing. And then their bodies just were different. Their mental game wasn't as strong. Nowadays, these guys are like all athletes. Like they're lifting, they're training, and which sounds weird for curlers. And they're going through the mental training as well. So I don't remember guys missing so many clutch shots, because we saw Dunstone as well, right?
Yeah, and you know what? It's such a wonderful point, because I've always said great curling games are the worst curling games. Like it's so wildly entertaining. The classics are when you have just a mass of rocks in the house and drama and misses. I would argue that the game has almost got so formulaic, and you heard the chants in the crowd last night, boring. I felt like I was watching Pat Ryan, the Ryan Express in the late 80s, with 4 blanks to start the Brier final. It's killing the game in some respects. I know there were some doubles made by Jacobs that took a 2 away on 2 different occasions for Dunstone, but they're so damn good now, and it makes for boring curling at time. And so I think it's a really good point. They are elite athletes. I think it was Brad Jacobs and those guys, Ryan Fry and the Harnden brothers. I mean, they were jacked, right? They just brought a whole new swagger to curling when they won in 2013 and then Olympic gold in 2014. But the game is so good. I, had a lot of conversations in Kelowna, like, what can you do? Because the sweeping, you guys, is so good as well, right? Like, you kind of got to be close now with the way these guys can carve the rocks, and you're going to make the shot. And so there were conversations, put cord brooms back in their hands and see what happens, right? But I think it's a good point. The curling is an elite sport. It's more professional than ever, and that's going to lead to some boring ends because they're just so precise, and the rings aren't big enough to hide the rocks anymore.
All right, for a lot of us, Devin, the Brier, not that we didn't watch the final, but I think for a lot of us, when the McEwen rink lost and the streak would continue, the 1980 streak that we
Curse of the Corral.
Yeah. Again and again and again. Take us through. McEwen for a safe double or a risky 3 game. Everything changes on that, and Saskatchewan's fate is sealed. If they had to do it again, do they take that safe 2 or do they go for 3 because they're trying to win and they're trying to be dominant?
Yeah, absolutely baffling. An absolutely baffling call, catastrophic call. That's what Mike McEwen called it. You win that game 90% of the time if you draw for 2 and you go up 4-2, headed to what? The 8th end, 7th end. I mean, they were in complete control of that game. And I had a lengthy conversation with Colton Flash because you know where my allegiances lie. I'm completely unobjective when it comes to watching a Saskatchewan rink curl at the Brier. Those guys were cooking. Like, they were playing so well. And to make it, listen, here's what I'll say about the call. If you're playing a Brad Gushue, a Brad Jacobs, a team like that, I can see justifying playing the hit and the tough double for 3 because those guys, quite frankly, in my opinion, are a better team than Carruthers, and you want to go for a kill shot at that point in the game. But against Carruthers, which I don't think is as skilled as a Gushue or a Jacobs, take the 2 all day, take control of the game. You're going to have the hammer and the even ends, and you're going to cruise to victory. And who knows what happens after that. It was baffling, and I think it was a call that's going to haunt Mike McEwen for a long time. You guys know when he misses a shot, his body language tells a story. I think he's worked on that part of his game. I am concerned that something like that can rattle a team to its core and that maybe it takes more time than you want it to rebound. But they're going to have to get their heads back on straight because the big prize, of course, is looming in November, the Olympic trials in Halifax. It is single-handedly the greatest curling event on the planet because you have the best there. It's going to be a best-of-3 final, and I honestly believe that if these McEwen guys can clean up their game, make some strategic calls when it matters the most, they could be right there in the final.
What did you make about, and I don't know the full story, but I did catch it on Twitter, and I think it might have been one of your, Devin Heroux joining us, by the way, from CBC, about Brad Gushue talking, and there was talk about bringing back relegation and the qualification. What's your take on that, Devin, a guy who follows a lot of curling?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was me who posted it, and of course that riled up a lot of people because, listen, 18 teams at a Brier is crazy to me. And the fact that, it just really is. And I loved it when we had the 12 teams. You remember when we watched and you knew that if you were 7-4, you were on the bubble. You might be in a tiebreaker, but if you got to the 8-3 mark, you were likely in the Page Plus. It was simple. The stories I write now, you guys, I have to spend 500 words explaining to curling fans how the playoff system works because you have 18 teams, and on the Friday you've got the 1 versus 2 qualifying game, and whoever loses that drops into this elimination game. But then if you win that, you're in this 3 versus 4. Like, it's crazy. And so that was Guju's point, is like, the pools were lopsided. I mean, it was awful. It was embarrassing. John Epping was 6-2 and was eliminated. And I talked to John, and he says to me, like, I came to the Brier for a double knockout. Like, that's what happened to me. And then 4-4 would have made the playoffs in the other pool. Nova Scotia got to 5-3, but 4-4 would have made the playoffs. Like, they just got to find a better way. And I've heard rumors on the wake of Guju saying relegation, right, when you had a play-in, essentially, and it was usually, some of the northern teams and some of the Atlantic teams. Then you get the round robin to a place where you're playing every team, or maybe they might go back to that championship pool thing, right, where they crossed over and played everybody in the other pool. I think, to me, that's what the national championship has to get back to. Every team has to play every team. That's where they need to get to. But I think Curling Canada has to decide what it wants the Scotties and the Brier to be. Because I think you have probably, a handful of teams that could win it. So do you create a new event that actually goes to getting your rep for Worlds, and then keep the Scotties and the Brier for sort of those grassroots amateur teams that you went to the Brier and the Scotties, and a club team out of Saskatchewan or New Brunswick or wherever had a chance of winning it? I think that's what Curling Canada is going to have to decide, because it's just gotten kind of crazy.
All right, with the men's world championships coming up in Moose Jaw at the end of the month, who's one country/team that some of us uninitiated on the world stage need to be watching for that you think could make some real noise here in the Band City? Well,
yeah, it's a great question. But first of all, I hope Saskatchewan shows up and shows out, because, listen, Benny Heaps is coming home, and he is so pumped up. He talked about that. He started to cry. I've done so many interviews with Ben Heber. I've never seen the guy more emotional than he was last night, because he said, playing a home Worlds down the road from where I was born in Regina, now getting to play in Moose Jaw wearing the maple leaf, it gives me goosebumps, guys. So I just hope everybody back home packs that place in Moose Jaw and cheers on the Canadians, because it's harder to win a world championship in curling than any other time in history. So to answer your question, I mean, it's Bruce Mowat and the team from Scotland. They're a juggernaut. Like, those guys are just on a completely different planet. And it's going to take everything for Jacobs to upend those guys. But, you know, you look at the Swiss, you look at Nicodine and Sweden, you look at Italy. I mean, you can't go in there and even expect to make it into a semifinal anymore. These guys are going to have to scrap and claw their way. I think home ice advantage is going to be a huge factor. And I should also point out that nothing is guaranteed right now for Canada to have locked up a spot at the Olympics a year from now, right? Canada likely has to finish in the top 6 to get enough points to qualify. That should happen. But I'm telling you, you have a couple of bad games in the round robin, and suddenly you find yourself like on a must-win game to make it into the playoffs to clinch Canada's spot at the Olympics. So it's going to be wildly entertaining, and you guys know I wouldn't miss it for the world. So I'll be back home sort of middle of the event, because I can't do a 10-day event anymore. Middle of the event, I'll be back home in Moose Jaw, and I can't wait to see everybody back home in the homeland for what's going to be a wicked bond spill.
That was my next question, if you were coming for that, and I thought it was a stupid question. Yeah, of course you are, Devin. You do a great job. Love following you, and listening to what you have to say. So my last question is a tough one. What would you take? Saskatchewan ending the curse, winning a Brier, or Bedford Road winning Brit?
Oh, oof! Wow.
If people out there don't know, Brit is a massive basketball tournament that came after Lit. It's in Saskatoon, so Regina people, it's like Lit. Bedford hasn't had a sniff since like the 80s.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah, and Britt, of course, started in 1968. So those are long droughts on both sides. Well, you know what? When I think about the magic of a Bedford team winning Britt like that would be incredible. But you know what? I'm tired of showing up at the Brier and being the joke, right? Like, we are such an incredible curling province. Like, we really are. And how many great curlers have left our province and won elsewhere? Like, that just drives me crazy. And you know what? My last point on that, any other time a player leaves their home province and goes and wins, nobody ever talks about it because there isn't a drought attached to it. Like, Jacobs is from Northern Ontario. He just won for Alberta, and all the Albertans are going to claim that. No, it was a Northern Ontario way, in the same way that people talk about McEwen being from Manitoba. So that I just needed to get that off my chest. I would take the drought ending because it's been way too long, and it has to end. And I really do believe Team McEwen could end it. Just take the two. Always take the easy two. That's my closing words.
That is. It's like when guys hit driver in a finish of a golf tournament, and all they're gonna do is find the fairway with an iron. What are you doing?
Find the fairway, and take the two. Words to live by.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's catch up when you're here. Thanks for doing this, Devin. I know it's been a long 24 hours for you.
I appreciate you guys, and we'll be sure to talk when I'm in Moose Jaw for Worlds.
Right on. From CBC, like I said, you follow him on Twitter, on X, does a great job. Devin Heroux.